Well, thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydoke, watch a story chosen by a friend of mine and see if I can guess their favourite things about it as I commentate along and drop facts and observations.
Hello Toby, it's Steve Cranford here. I'm a TV and radio broadcaster living at Worthing down in West Sussex. Now, I'd like to thank you for letting me choose my favourite Doctor Who story to have a chat with you about. For me, this has to be the one I have the earliest strong memories for, which is the 1978 story, The Stones of Blood from the Key to Time season.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to the second instalment of The Stones of Blood, which I find myself being slightly apologetic to and about. And I know a lot of people feel that this story gets disappointing because it's a story of two halves and the second part in hyperspace is not as compelling as the grim hammer horror goings-on of the first two. But that's not actually been my issue with it. My issue with it has always been that the grim hammer horror goings-on of the first couple of parts have not been all they're cracked up to be for various reasons that I'm sure we'll go into. However, I found myself really enjoying episode 1, and some of the things I thought I hadn't liked about it, like the rather grey, VT look of the early evening scenes, is actually absolutely fine. I also find myself in the fortunate position here where I can read from some of the people who've listened to part 1 of this, because I put it up before I'd recorded this part 2. So Adam said it's hard to resist having sausage sandwiches when watching this one. Well, we will see, Adam. Kevin was talking about the dedication to Matt there at Matt Dale at the end of part 1. Guy Lambert says, I had that horror book too, talking about the Beaver Book of Horror. I've had a few pictures of that sent to me as well. Guy suspects it was my dad's, but it was one of those books where the cover was spooky enough to scare me without reading it. Wasn't there also one with a skull and a snake coming out of its eye? Shudder. Yes! I actually don't... I quite like the fact that my childhood was when it was, because... I don't know, this might be me just being old and talking out of my hat, but kids today don't seem scared of anything. I quite like the fact that, actually, I semi-believed a lot of horror stuff. Again, it's why I sort of react, rather nonplussedly to cynics who are sort of, so wise they dismiss everything and can dismantle everything to its base constituents. I like a bit of wonder. I like a bit of mystery. I liked the fact that there were, even though rationally I knew there couldn't be such things, there aren't such things as vampires, etc. I still nonetheless, the supernatural things of which there were legends did contain some fear for me, and going to bed in the icy cold, slightly underneath a slightly sort of damp, not because it was wet, just because the air was so sort of cold and moist, duvet in a country house in the late 1970s, where the trees cast shadows on the windows, and if the wind blew, the windows scratched at the pane. You felt genuine fear. Now, why do I like the fact that I felt that? I don't know. I think it... I was scared of supernatural beings. Never did me any harm. I don't know, but I kind of like the fact that I wasn't so rational that I could dismiss everything, because I suppose it means you're in touch with your imagination. Maybe it just means you're a credulous idiot, or maybe it just means you were 10. I don't care, but I don't mind that there were books around that scared the younger me. Stephen Moffat, not that one. Love the remarks about the eccentrics of Doctor Who featuring DWM. Yes, well, there were others as well. Fantasy males, I remember, and fantasy females. We could have an annual on the theme, couldn't we? Stephen Burkoff alone would merit a pull-out supplement. Yes, Stephen, but that's a genuine, that's an eccentric in real life, whereas of course the eccentrics of Doctor Who article in Doctor Who magazine that was pure padding was just characters who were a bit eccentric. But yes, eccentrics of Doctor Who. You could do a long list, not least Tom Baker himself. David Green says, I'm probably in a minority of one here, but I think the video works in this story. Visually, it's grey and isolated, leading to an air of melancholy, cold and discord, or something like that. And Lordy, wasn't Mary Tam absolutely beautiful? David, I'm not sure you're wrong, so don't worry about it. You don't have to be all coy about your beliefs just because I've stated mine, because as we discover as we go through these, I'm usually wrong about most things, or I find it very easy to change my mind. This common body like to a vagabond flag upon the stream, what is it, goes lacking the varying tide, goes to and fro. Basically, it's a quote from Antony and Cleopatra about how people easily change their minds, and why the voting public are all stupid, essentially. So I was being that and proving I was stupid by not getting the quote right. Frank Shells, I don't mind the OBE videotape. See, David? Frank either. Location work on Seeds of Doom, Sontaran Experiment, or even Robot, so I don't mind it here. There are even some instances of it in Talons of Weng-Chiang too. It's a shame about the film of the sea beneath the cliffs in that Romana cliffhanger scene, though. Paul says Stones is a funny one. First half is Super Doctor Who, but the second half... Now that, Paul, I think, is a view shared by a lot of people. David Gillespie Pratt says, I've always found this an odd, disjointed experience. I've always put that down to first seeing it when I borrowed my friend's UK Gold recording, which was missing part 1. Oh, that's nothing. I had a Kinder that went part 1, part 3, part 4, then part 2. And sometimes I couldn't be bothered to fast forward, so I'd watch it the wrong order. But I did have some that were missing. What did I have that were missing? I had quite a lot that were missing part 4s, because if you had an E180, you'd have episodes 1 to 4 of something, and then episodes 1 to 3 of something else. And so I quite often, didn't have with me, or if I borrowed off somebody else, so you were missing part 4. Richard Bignell, no less, says, I've always loved the Stones of Blood because the Ogre gave me the real creeps when I was 13. Back in the 1970s, standing stones were a really unnerving thing on television. In 1972, we'd had ATV's Escape into the Night, and I vividly recall the Stones with one eye and their eerie voices surrounding Mark's house. 5 years later, we had the very unnerving Children of the Stones, then the Stones of Blood a year later, and then in 1979, bad things happening with stone circles in Quatermass. Big stones were not good things back in the 1970s. I don't think I know ATV's Escape into the Night, Richard, so I will have to educate myself on that one. I do know the others, of course, and I note to my horror, now that Network is closed, I don't seem to have Children of the Stones on DVD anymore. And I just looked, I thought, I'll just pick it up then. Of course, Network's closed. The cheapest you can get it on eBay is for about 80 quid. Well. Matt says, this was my favourite Target novelisation as a child. Looking back, I think David Fisher served his stories well in book form. Leisure Hive and Creature from the Pit are among my favourite reads. Sorry, Terence. I was always a bit puzzled over the mechanics of how the stones moved. I'm pretty sure the production team felt similarly in 1978. Aside from the overall atmosphere of the story, my faves were K9 assisting Professor Rumford building a hyperspace transmat gun lash-up from the kitchen implements, and Romana's introduction to sausage sandwiches. We certainly have all of that to look forward to, because we've only done episode 1. I'm about to do episode 2, and let's see how we go, shall we? But I thought that was nice, as we'd had some listener feedback to share the experience, because Doctor Who as a communal experience is not to be sniffed at, and is what fandom is all about. And sometimes it's quite nice for me, actually, to, if I throw something out there like the Beaver Book of Horror or some of my thoughts, to have somebody come back and either confirm them or push back at them, but mostly confirm them. I prefer confirmation. I prefer to feel that I'm not alone. If I want an argument, I can just go onto the internet. So anyway, listen up, peeps. Let's watch part 2 of The Stones of Blood, which, as we know, is very much still in the Hammer horror vein, which, as I say, for me is a slightly mixed experience. I will also point out something rather spooky has happened. Having sort of maybe queried some elements of lovely Daryl Blake's direction in some of the scenes, not all his fault, for example, not having Tom Baker for the cliffhanger, this week he tried to connect with me on a social media platform, with me not having messaged or thought about him for a while. And then, rather weirdly, for some reason I was thinking about one of the websites, not a Den of Geek. Was it Den of Geek? Yeah. that a comic I used to know wrote for. He was a sort of a part-time comic who also was a bit of a journalist with his foot in the geeky camp. And I remember he was doing something for Den of Geek, and he wanted a quote, and he asked me for a quote, and this was years ago, and I felt rather important because he was asking me for a quote. But he was like, well, no, it was when I was doing my Doctor Who scarf, and who's going, well, you'd be doing me a favour, giving me a quote for my article further. And I thought, oh, suddenly am I getting a bit of credibility? But anyway, that's beside the point. Because somebody, Den of Geek, or was it Pop Pitch? It was one of those. Anyway, it was one of they're all cool to me. They're all written by the cool kids. And anyway, he, I thought, oh, I wonder what happened to him, because he was a good comic. He was slightly political, and he was a nice guy, smart, intelligent guy. Haven't seen him for a while. Hope he's okay. And literally that evening, was this yesterday? I then got a message on Instagram, of all things, so a very convoluted way of getting in contact. And I had to go looking for it as well, because you don't just get messages pop up on Instagram. Anyway, it said requests too, and I clicked on requests, and it was him going, hello, I've been living in Dubai, and I haven't been doing comedy for years, but I'm coming back to the UK. I'd love to do 10 minutes at the club, blah, blah. And he said, I haven't seen you for, and this was a guy who, bear in mind, I thought, oh yeah, I haven't seen him for a bit. 15 years. 15 years. But I thought about him in the same way that I thought about Daryl Blake. I thought about him, I mean, in this chap's case, yesterday, and that evening I got the message for him. Daryl Blake, okay, I thought about him because I was doing this, but also in the week of me doing this, he tried to connect with me on social media. Isn't that so? And I told this to Shirley, and she says, well, you see, you put it out there and it comes. I still think there's probably loads of people I've thought about who haven't been in touch with me on the same day that I've thought about them. But nonetheless, it's all a bit supernatural, isn't it? So let's see if there's something spooky in the air around the Stones of Blood back in the Doctor Who days of yore. So I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we are, part 2 of the Stones of Blood, which is generally considered to be at the superior end of it, although it is a hugely popular story anyway. It tends to come out top of the polls, doesn't it, of the Key to Time season. For me, it is not at the top, because I think I'm happier with the sort of the wit and Daring Do. I quite like the Daring Do. There's the sort of swords and fantasy element. There's those sort of almost Sunday afternoon story time kind of feel of Rebos and Androids of Tara. I can kind of live with. I think that's been slightly stabilised by the restoration team. That shot with Romana on the cliffs. Banana Truatarolunda. Now, I don't like this. Elaine Ives Cameron as Martha. Leonard. Leonard and Martha. I mean, not the most felicitated. I read a terribly sad article by Elaine Ives Cameron, who I think I mentioned last time was an American lady, where she talked about her house being invaded by squatters and her actually, breaking into her own house in order to see the damage that had been wrought, and the police coming around and telling her to leave because of some stupid law, and how it had been damaged and sort of abused by the people that had taken possession of it. And she wrote an article in the Independent about her experiences and her being part of getting the law changed, and it made, I hate injustice, it made terrible reading. It's very, very funny that Leonard decides that the word bicycle is blasphemous. I think that's emblematic of some of my problems with the story, and it's nobody's fault really. Is that that obvious studio interior to to the bicycle that has caused Leonard to be so cross. The way that last extra moves slightly slower out of the picture. Is it, it does seem to be two different places on two different days, although the lighting here is very, very good. For the I love the way he sort of flinches when she pulls the knife out, and I love her reaction. Her very game reaction to him being tied up is rather fun. She is a good character, a great eccentric. Oh, and she's wearing a bit of a kerchief. I like a kerchief, but the lighting of this studio interior of the Stones is good, but obviously it's pitch black there, and that's partially to hide the fact that it's a set without any walls. And you go, well, that's okay. It's nighttime, but it does mean it's slightly darker in Stonesville than it is in Clifftop Avenue. So that's one of the issues with cutting between interior, exterior. Although, they would argue, I'm sure, that one of the reasons for shooting on videotape is to make that clash less stark. But actually, when you've got the lighting, studio lighting here as Warwick Fielding, that I think is very lovely, but it doesn't quite match the greyness of what they filmed on location. But this is beautiful. I mean, having Doctor Who and an eccentric old lady in some ancient, hanging around some ancient stones at night, is a beautifully Doctor Who-y thing. He always looks like he's slightly chewing a bit of cud, Tom Baker, when he wants to be, when he wants to have a sort of sense of dramatic urgency about him. He's saying to K9, "Come on, K9," and there's a kind of cussedness to him, isn't there? That isn't always wholly pleasant. But should Doctor always be pleasant? Not necessarily. He shouldn't. So yeah, this is sort of grim and dusky, and there's a nice owl sound there, but it's sort of murky, isn't it? Rather than and they do clever things with K9, of course, who alternates between sort of bobbling along and then suddenly zooming when he gets onto whatever track or planks have been laid down in order to assist his egress. So does he do that here? Yeah, he's I think he's struggling to get onto the plate. He changes direction. Does he zoom off here? I think he does. Just trying to it doesn't quite happen mid-shot as I thought it does. Maybe it doesn't happen at all. But or does it here? Yes, there we go. Yeah, so he bobbles along, and then suddenly he's clearly got to the planks that the technicians have laid down. I think that's reasonable. Again, I don't know if it's been. I think it has been slightly messed about with in post by the restoration team, but it's. This is all lovely. I love the shots of the Doctor and K9 over the cliff, and the shot of Romana with the sea down beneath her is good. And this does feel. I remember doing a student film, and I hung on the edge of a sort of cliff. It wasn't, but if it had been shot properly, like this, actually, it would have. It would have been. And I remember saying to my fellow student who was below, film it. That's beautiful. See, I think that's really nice. And also, actually, the way that she pushed him, if they had actually been by the side of a cliff, that would have been very dangerous. But it's shots like that I don't think there's another real sort of example of something that looks quite like this, of the two of them, obviously on CSO with whatever it is, that plate, that stock footage or whatever of the sea with the sun, and they've chosen a lovely shot, and also the sort of black cupboard that they have in the TARDIS. There's bits like that make Stones of Blood have a unique visual elements for me, that when I see them I think, oh yeah, this is the story that has those, and I can't think of another story that is reminiscent of reminds me of those. So I always feel that Stones of Blood has a couple of aspects to it sort of quite mundane, ordinary aspects, if you like, that make it extraordinary. I mean, it's obviously got lots of other things that stories don't have, but those two sort of visual bits make it feel like we have perhaps a slightly different eye. But yeah, my fellow drama student, when I was doing that, I remember telling her to get right beneath me and sort of show as much of me as possible, so it looked like I was hanging off the edge of a cliff, because you could have cheated it with the angle. And then when we got it all back, she shot it really high up, and it was just my shoulders and the edge, and it looked crap. and I'd been had been dangling, relatively high, but it wasn't particularly dangerous, but it was certainly more dangerous than it looked. It's a bit odd, isn't it, that Romana, was it that she couldn't decide which costume she wanted to wear for this story, so that she so she goes, well, why don't we have both of them? But they're both lovely costumes, and she wears, I mean, she could wear a sack and make it look elegant, but the colours are nice. So here we have Susan Engel and Beatrix Lehman, and now we're outside again. I do like the fact that she has the tracer in her boot or in her shoe, but like James Dirk, isn't it? She keeps the tracer in her sock. But I do like anything that sort of, Doctor Who has people with tartan flasks of a hot drink at night. I kind of like those little touches of real life, but an almost prosaic real life, They're all Rachel Trenton News jersey. Do you have to have a license? You don't have to have a dog license now, which, well, let's not get into that, because I think you probably should, but because I see some people behaving very badly with dogs, but let's not get into that. As I record this man, Tom Baker, this man who can talk about legends and folklore and history in deep, sonorous tones, as though, there's something of great import, and then suddenly sort of lighten up by going, would you show them to Romana, with that sort of light-hearted, sort of chatty way of sort of, a very light way. He flits between sonorous darkness and light flippancy, if you like. He's turns 90. He's turned 90 today as I record this. I'm recording this on Tom Baker's 90th birthday. I mean, they're not hiding the fact that Vivian is slightly dodgy there, are they? It's now in the video version of this, they do have an extra bit of the scene with Leonard and Martha, don't they? Where she says, we could go to Plymouth, and he goes, Plymouth, Martha. I do think these two are dreadful. I'm sorry, and as I say, I like Nick McArdle. He's a good actor and a very good, lovely voiced actor who's very good at audiobooks and narration and things like that, and has been a good actor in loads of other things. But I think they're badly written, terribly performed in these scees. But what is interesting is, and that scene where she goes, "We should go to Plymouth," is aped in a League of Gentlemen, Tubbs, and the village shop people. Talk about she talks about running away to Plymouth. Tubbs and Edward. Should have been called Leonard. But this I love. This is grim because the house has been totally smashed up and their skulls have been smashed, but you can see their bodies there, but you can't see their heads. And the suggestion is, that their heads have been smashed to pieces, which is really grim. I mean, about as grim as Doctor Who gets. And it does it really well because it does it enough that it's suitable for children, but enough to have that suggestion that something as nasty as could ever happen in a Doctor Who has happened, without it sort of being off, without having just a close up of the Doctor and us not seeing it. We see enough of it. I think that's really well done by Darryl Blake, and again, it feels unlike what they might do in some other dogs. There we go. Now the stones get a bit of stick. I love the augury. I love the glowing light. I love the fact that they smash through doors and stuff. And I love K9 holding fast and zapping the deadly blood-sucking stones. I think Doctor Who story to say we have ancient stones and they suck blood, and that they scientificize it, they scientifize it, don't they? By sort of him going, well, they need plasma or something, which makes it sound all sciencey. But what it means is we are blood-sucking ancient stones, which is a wonderfully Doctor Who thing. Sausage sandwiches, and again, a bit like the thermos flask. I love the fact that they make the choice of sausage sandwiches. Now, I know lesser men than I would go, sausage. I think you can have a sausage in something without it being a phallic reference, and I prefer myself just to enjoy the fact that they're eating sausage sandwiches. I think sausage sandwiches sound fun, and again, not because of any sort of naughtiness, but because a sausage sandwich is quite a fun thing. It's a good sound, isn't it? Would you like a sausage sandwich? And I do like a sausage sandwich. I'm a veggie, but you can get very good veggie sausages these days. I prefer a bit of mustard and tomato ketchup combined on mine, although I'm not averse to brown sauce either. I mean, the things you can do. I even sometimes don't mind a bit of piccalilli. If it's a cold sausage with piccalilli. Ooh, yes, please. And I like that fool Idwell Morgan. We don't know who that is. We never come across him, but it suggests, again, a life off, and the fact that they these aren't just sort of isolated eccentrics, but a part of a network of researchers and intellectuals and book writers who have different opinions, etc. Now, I don't think they're very thick sausage, and if I was Vivian Fay, I would have cut that sandwich in half. I mean, I'm not sure you're listening for this for me to go into how I would consume a sausage sandwich, but there's a lot more sandwich than sausage by the looks of that there. Mine would be a much thicker affair, although I would argue with Shirley actually about how to, I don't know how you, listener, cut your sausages for your sausage sandwich. I'm very much a lengthways down the middle of the sausage, whereas Shirley, I think, would chop it up into mini circles, chop like you chop a carrot. But then to me, then they'd all just fall out. But yeah, a sausage cut lengthways, maybe with a few fried onions as well, if I was being naughty, fried onions and mushrooms too. But I don't mind a pure sausage sandwich, but would definitely need sauce. As I say, piccalilli if cold. I like the fact she doesn't have a plate either, because often I think props people would go, oh, well, they need to have a plate to have the sausage sandwich on. But I like the fact that they've given the choice, just put it on the side, because I would probably just put it on the side. I love the fact that she's got it's a truncheon. I do like that exchange about the truncheon. She got arrested for carrying an offensive weapon. I think that's really, really delightful. But again, truncheon, I've seen that be sort of chortled upon by men of a certain age. Sausage sandwich and a truncheon in the same scene, and potentially a sapphic vibe between Vivian and Professor Rumford. There's a lot of schoolboy humour to be had in those scenes, which I sort of resist. I like the truncheon because it's a character thing. I like a sausage sandwich because I think it's a charming thing and a charming phrase, and because it enables me to muse on the different ways of enjoying a sausage sandwich, which is a food stuff I've eaten a fair amount of in my time. I do like this image of K9, and I love the way that John Leeson says they were so strong. He's so brave in this K9. I like it when K9 is brave. Advise cannibalization for reusable parts. No, we have to save K9. And I love the fact that she looks genuinely concerned that they might have to turn him into scrap. And the fact that they're having the conversation away from his ear shot, I think, is really, really sweet. No, don't remove the cerebral core. Oh, and I love that. I mean, it's a silly robot dog, but I love the way that this is played entirely sort of convincingly, and that we are led to feel for this silly prop that is beautifully voiced by John Leeson, and it does catch the vibe of sort of what a dog is, which is something that is sort of innocent and loyal and brave and all of those lovely things. And I say that as I look at my dog, who's having a sneeze down the other end of the sofa from me. Oh dear! I'm sure Tom Baker on either, is it the commentary for this or is it the Tom Baker years, or I can't remember. No, it's in his autobiography, where I think he takes a bit of a shine to Elaine Ives Cameron. I love that talk of globulin deficient, blood plasma, all of that attempts, because what it does is it makes it scientifically plausible and gives a nod to it being the science of the science fiction. Oh, that's really grim. That's really grim. Those two dead bodies, and she's got the blood. But that allow our alien beasts to be blood-sucking. I think that's terrific, and that's really grim, and that's obviously probably slightly thinner than real blood would be, but I think it's convincing enough, and it's a good colour. And then you get a heartbeat as well. I think the stones are ingenious, and I do like the sort of the Kaliak's costume. I remember seeing it on the front cover of the book and going, that looks a bit weird, but I think it really works, because we know it's obviously a ceremonial garb, but it's black and white amongst the blackness of the night sky, and obviously then broken up by the red. I think the colours of this story are rather well thought out. This is all sort of musty brown wooden panelling. I think the colours of everything really add to the atmosphere. The Kaliak. That was another one. We've been having a bit of chat on my Patreon about words we mispronounced when we were younger, and mandragora is the biggest one. I think is the most common, but I'm sure I pronounced Kaliak Kailich until I heard this, and there are loads of different ones. Even Omega. I still argue with my one of my children about it being Omega or Omega. I like a secret. Secret panel. Yes, please. This is all a bit exciting, isn't it? And atmospheric. Tom Baker's very good at this. He's done a lot of wiping his brow with his scarf in this one. He's obviously come up with a little bit of business that he's decided he's going to quite enjoy doing. Oh, we love a Mary Tam, don't we? I feel with Mary Tam that if we'd got more of Mary Tam, the actual Mary Tam, than of Romana, we might have had more fun. I sometimes don't think she's quite as convincing as Romana as on occasion. I love that. The two birds on top of the TARDIS. That's brilliant, and she does that very, very well. It's just sometimes her line readings seem a little bit flat on occasion. But when she's Mary Tam as Mary Tam, she's an absolute hoot and a total legend. And I think the pressure to be sort of cold and posh and aloof as Romana perhaps plays against her strength sometimes, where she was, a bit of a bit of a raised eyebrow and a bit of a guttural, filthy laugh. But of course, having the aloof and intelligent and well-behaved Romana as a contrast to the scruffy insolence of the Doctor is a good dynamic to aim for. So you can see why they did it. They're all Vivian Fay, you see. So that mystery doesn't hold out for a particularly long time, which is fine. I mean they've and there's a model you see that's again not everything quite matches up in this story. I would say it's not quite as smooth. The bumps aren't quite smoothed out. She's great, isn't she, Susan Engel? She's got wonderful eyes. This is I seem to recall this is quite an abrupt cliffhanger as well. Oh, because it's obvious now that she's the Kaliak, and there we go. And then I think, do we just go straight into the cliffhanger? So we've had the reveal that it's Vivian Fay, and then we cut to that, and then we cut to a model, and then she sort of zaps her and she's off. I hate it when iPlayer does that, or maybe that was me being too quick to stop iPlayer doing that. Let's just see if it will let me finish watching the credits, because I like watching the credits. No, you see, it's gone right back to the beginning. A public service broadcaster thinks that we probably don't want to read the credits. Well, even if we don't, public service broadcaster, it is your job to encourage us so to do, to appreciate the hard work of the people that made these things. And if we don't want to, you should make it an effort for us to not, rather than the other way round. That's my feeling. So I have just fast forwarded all the way through the episode in order to watch the cliffhanger again, and in order to watch the closing credits, because they are a part of the programme, and somebody went to a great deal of trouble to make them, and they list the names of all of the people who were involved, and I think it behoves us to watch and read those names, especially as they are, they even go to the trouble of making them legible in terms of size and speed. And I know K9 gets credited, doesn't he? Yeah, before De Vries and Martha, which is good for him and bad for them. So maybe having just remonstrated with the BBC, maybe it was me. I think it's because when I watch it on BritBox, I have to grab the remote and quickly press that arrow button to stop the credits disappearing. In fact, I think I just did that, and that's what made it go back to scratch. So apologies, BBC iPlayer, you've just let me read the credits, and aren't you wonderful so doing? And you're quite rightly filling your public service remit. Yeah, now it's saying next episode. Good. So actually, I take that back. I was wrong. The iPlayer encouraged me to read the credits, and read the credits I did. I read Matt Irvin's name. I read AJ Mitchell's name. I read John Stout's name. And now I'm trying to get into my phone to try and. There we go. Because the remote's on the phone. John Stout, who is a designer I don't know much about. I don't think I've read an interview or seen an interview with John Stout. Phil Newman is the designer guy. He will know what John Stout's up to, if anything. But I don't. I couldn't even put a face to John Stout. He's one of the few sort of mysteries, which is unusual, because usually we're pretty good on people from this period of the show. Anyway. It may just be that I've read an interview or and I've not remembered. That's possible. You don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm rambling. That's partially what this is, though, isn't it? It's a man rambling. What is my favourite thing about Stones of Blood Part 2? Well, I mean, is it the sausage sandwiches? I do like that scene. I like the truncheon exchange. I like all of that characterization they give Amelia via the dialogue and via just little things like the choice of sausage sandwich. I think is funny. The fact that she's got a truncheon, the fact that she's got the knife that she cuts the Doctor free from. She's very game, isn't she, Amelia Rumford? I do like Amelia Rumford. I think the sausage sandwich scene is delightful, because we then go on to the truncheon and Vivian revealing that actually she got arrested for carrying an offensive weapon. I do like all of that. I think that's fun. I love the sort of nighttime-ness and the ravens on the TARDIS, which I think are incredible. I love I love the smashed skulls and the headless corpses, just because I think that's quite bold for Doctor Who, and it's subtle. You don't see anything, but it doesn't do any tricks. It doesn't hold back on anything. It still has the corpses in view, and it doesn't. It doesn't draw attention to the fact that it's hidden the heads. It just kind of has. It's quite subtly done, even though it's all there, and yet it's not all there. Do you know what I mean? I think that is pretty well rendered on both occasions, when you've got the corpses in the house, and then when you've got them by the stones, where she's got the blood to pour into the stones from the two corpses with their heads smashed in. I mean, it's pretty grim. And I'd forgotten that they have those two dead bodies there, that she takes them out of the house and puts them in the stone circle. I think that's pretty good. I think that's good. And that, to me, as a kid, is exactly the sort of thing that I wanted in my Doctor Who. And yet, it's not remotely grotesque or gruesome. It's all sort of suggestion. So I think that's really good, because I loved stuff as a kid that made me feel like I was watching something that was pretty close to the bone. But I think my favourite thing really is, stones smashing through windows, K9 zapping away, and K9's sort of brave holding off of the stones, almost at the cost of his own existence, and the way that John Leeson says that line about they were so strong, and the fact that those stakes are really high, and the way that they sort of deal with the parlour state that K9 is in. So K9 facing off against the stones, K9 zapping the stones themselves as a threat. That whole aspect of the show, the attack of the stones, shall we say? Attack of the Stones is my favourite bit of the Stones of Blood Part 2. What is my guest, the lovely Stephen Cranford, going to say about episode 2 of the Stones of Blood? What is his favourite thing?
One of my favourite scenes from part 2 is where the Doctor and Professor Rumford find that little priest hole by turning the head of that crow on the mantelpiece, and they make their way down to the cellar, down those dusty steps, and they switch on the light, which is swinging, and I never quite understood why it was swinging, but it looks great. And they see the missing paintings from the hall that are down there, and the revelation that the baddie of the story is actually the Kaliak, which is our Vivian Fay, of course.
Yeah, I was talking about something else, and I love that swinging. I love the fact that they go in and the light is swinging, and that to me is another very Doctor Who-y thing. Priest holes, dusty, damp spaces in old houses, and again, that was all stuff that seems sort of plausible to me. Even now, I have a dream that I live in a house that has a sort of wing that is uninhabitable and dusty and dark, and it's often falling off the edge of a cliff into the sea, but suddenly the house I live in is much bigger than I'd expected it to be, and this is all very exciting, because God, imagine what you could do with this space, but then you can't do anything with the space because it's all damp and dank and dusty, and variations of that theme a lot, but having more space than I can do anything with, but that space is somehow compromised by uninhabitability. I don't know what that means. Any dream merchants out there? I've stopped having the one where your teeth all fall out. I have that one. Used to have that one quite a lot. I still do have the one where I'm in a play and I don't know my lines, or my trousers. I go on and I don't have any trousers on, or I'm about to go on and I realise I haven't rehearsed. That's quite a common actor's one. Though I had one recently where I was rehearsing with Laurence Olivier at the National, and and also I nipped out for a smoke and came back, and I clearly missed a scene I was supposed to be on, so I was the architect of my own destruction then. But sometimes I have one where actually it's all going well, and I'm working, in a job that I would really love to, and I don't make a hash of it at all. And the gruesome punchline to that is that I wake up and I realise that, oh, damn, that was actually only in my dreams. But no, that the house with sort of extra wings and extra space, but those wings are fallen into disrepair, is one that crops up quite a lot. And I lived in quite a sort of old, sort of big old house, cold house, when I was growing up. And again, I read books, always had horror books, or the old horror films that we watched always seemed to, have dark, cobwebby rooms, and ancient paintings always, speak of, again, the past, which, because it is dead and gone, if it can still live, that is somehow is haunting and creepy and strange. And I think Doctor Who, when it invokes the past in that way, is has a lot in common with the sort of horror films and the horror books that one read as a kid, and that's all the that's all the stuff that this story, I think, mainlines very, very well. And that scene is a good example of that. And I like the swinging light too. I like the lighting in this story, even though that stone circle lighting doesn't match up with what's going on outside, which, seeing as they'd filmed the outside first, is a bit naughty. But they've gone, well, we're doing what we do here. That's all we can do. And I do think those scenes, divorced of the fact that they have to match up to what's around them, are really, really nicely lit. But as I say, it is an issue with this story that the model shots don't quite match with what's on the outside, and the visual is a bit bumpy and isn't quite as streamlined as it might be. And that again gives it a uniqueness, in my view, in the same way that TARDIS off room with the black drapes does, and that cliff top shot. There's an element to it that there are elements to it that seem very much of its own. And now I'm thinking, but there are other Key to Time scenes where they're in a cupboard that's just black drapes. So why do I just associate it with this? Well, I do. They're my memories, and it's my brain, and it's the associations that I have. They don't have to be correct associations, but they're just what stick out for me. Anyway, I didn't get the same thing as Stephen, but I would very much have. I do very much concur with his choice. I think that is a lovely, just a very simple scene that is very Doctor Who-y and is very well done and is very atmospheric, and leads us to that cliffhanger, which is rather odd and perfunctory and strange, and again seems slightly dislocated and disjointed. But yes, I very much enjoyed that instalment, but I do, I do nonetheless stand by the fact that it is visually very disjointed, and Martha and Leonard are rubbish. And nobody really talks about it. There's a lot of performances in Doctor Who over the years that get stick, and I think a lot of them unfairly so, and I think a lot of them which for their time are absolutely fine, and times change and that. But I think Martha and Leonard are not good. But if you don't like it, then I challenge you to a duel in Plymouth. Yes, Plymouth. You can meet me. We all run away to Plymouth. But in the meantime, this is not a local podcast. It is for international people, and I hope everybody listening to this, wherever you are, enjoys it. And thanks very much for joining me, and I will speak to you next time. But as it is being recorded today on the 20th of January 2024, when Tom Baker ascends to his 90th year, let's say sausage sandwiches all round in celebration of the maestro, the one and only Tom Baker. Many happy returns. Well, do you know what? I'm tickle pink that you listen to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest, Stephen Cranford, who can be found on social media at SB Cranford. Check him out. I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Peter Chamberlain, John Ball, Darcy Smart, Scott Sherritt, Paul Harris, Patrick Emery, Adam Parkin, Jim Cameron, Endaf Arwin, Shane Plays, Jonathan Evans, Chris Knight, Matt Metabilis 3, Stephen Witowski, Steve Phillips, Craig Wallace, Rick Moran, John Williams, Aaron Krokulowski, Matthew Harris, Graham, Julian Bashford, Angus Gulliver, Paul Jones, Man in a Skirt Alert, Trim Trenowden, John Molyneux, David Brodie, Michael Harvey, Steve Walker, Sarah Krotzer, B. Baker, Jim Mooney, Andrew Jolly, and David James Wilson. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your names read out, like those people just have, they are the newest people to have joined the Patreon page of tobyhadoke.com. No, tobyhadoke.com is my website. The Patreon page has nothing to do with that. The Patreon page is patreon.com/tobyhadoke. So go, you can go to either of those things. My website, tobyhadoke.com, has news and blogs and various bits and bobs of what I'm up to. Patreon has exclusive releases, bonus material. This podcast, well, you all have heard, it was recorded and released, because I was a little bit behind, so it was released minutes after it was recorded, on the 20th of January 2024. So whenever this goes out, I don't know yet, but it's usually about 6 months later. So if you've enjoyed this and gone, are there more of those? Yeah, there are 6 months more probably, or as many more as there are days between where you are now. Count backwards to January the 20th, 2024. That's how much content you're missing out on. As I say, they're usually 6 months ahead. You're also ahead with the Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic podcasts, although they do take a little bit longer to do, so I'm lagging behind with those. Note to self, get onto those. I will do, I promise. I've got some half written of all of them. I just need to put them all together. But it's been Christmas. I mean, again, if you're listening to this, you're not a patron, and I'm going, we've just had the 60th anniversary, and we've had Christmas and New Year and my birthday. You'll be going, it's June, mate. Get over Christmas. What are you talking about? That's all to do with time displacement. You see, you're miles away. Chronologically, you can't be chronologically miles away, but you get what I mean. You're in the future. I'm in the present. You're in the future, and my present is your past. But that's because you're in the future. I'm talking rubbish now. I'm tempted to start again because this has kind of got away from me, but I don't have time because the patrons need to have their feed, and they haven't had a release today, so I need to get this out to them, and that's it's their fault. So become part of the blame, become part of the reason that these have very tortuously long and rambly exits. By going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you can get all the goodies, the advanced releases, the bonus material, monthly AMAs. You get footage from and photographs from documentaries that I've made and commentaries that I've done, and all stuff that I don't release anywhere else. £3 a month, you can go up to whatever you want, and you also get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year. If you don't fancy doing that, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, which is another way of supporting these releases, because I'm a freelance creative, and it is how we sing. No, I'm singing for my supper anyway. It's how we get our supper, if you are so inclined. It feels awful doing it, but I'm trying to get over myself because it's fine. It's actually fine. I produce a lot of content, and I hope it's good. And if you think it's good, then you are in a position where you can support it, then please do. If you're not, that's fine too. I'm just grateful that you listen. But what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes, Spotify, Podbeans, all the places where you can rate and review things and give these 5 stars and a few lines explaining what it is you like about them. It's probably not the tortuous, rambly outros that this bit is. In fact, so many people probably haven't rated and reviewed because they haven't got this far. They haven't got to the bit where I ask you to, because they've taken a sense. They've very sensibly bailed long before we got to this point. But if you stuck it out this far, well done. Now go and make it worthwhile by giving me the much-needed affirmation that I never got from my parents. It explains it all, doesn't it? Go on, off you go. Thank you. Well, no, don't yet, because there's some more unnecessary coders, which seems to have become the house style for these things. So yes, unnecessary coder 2 is the social media one. I'm on Twitter, or X. Will you be calling it in X in the future? We're still calling it Twitter on the 20th of January 2024, even though it's been called X for quite a while. And newspapers now go on the platform X, which everybody knows as Twitter, or do they say on Twitter, which is now called X, even though we're calling it Twitter. Anyway, I'm still very much a Twitter sort of chap. I'm still very much an Opal Fruits and Marathon sort of chap, if I'm honest. But I wonder if by the time that we get to you, everyone's calling it X and you'll go, Twitter? You may as well be spending farthings. But there we go. On Twitter, I am at Toby Haydoke. These podcasts have their own feed as well, at Haydoke Podcasts. And on Instagram, I'm at toby.haydoke. I'm trying to get better at that. And I have my website, tobyhaydoke.com, and I have a Facebook page as well. So sign up to all of that, and I try and mix it up and put different things on different platforms, and just trying to get good at that stuff. Probably not, but I have a bash. That was good advertising. Probably not that good, but go on anyway. There we go. So not only an unnecessary coda, but a dreadfully wrought one as well. I note actually, and I didn't strike me at the time that in those comments I did an unusual thing, didn't I? I read comments from people who were responding to episode 1. I quite like that. It gives me something to say. I quite like it when I listen to a podcast and people say stuff from people who have corresponded. But anyway, I'm not gonna. I'll do it if it happens, and I won't if it don't. And that sometimes depends on. Well, no, it usually depends on my recording, whether I've finished recording the whole story by the time I've put the first episode out, and I hadn't done that in this case on the Patreon page. But Matt said he liked David Fisher's novelizations and apologised to Terence Dix. But Terence wrote the novel for Stones of Blood, didn't he? Because David Fisher then did one subsequently. Unless Matt was a child when David Fisher did his novelisation of the Stones of Blood, which means Matt is very young indeed. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The David Fisher books are quite slightly different. But it was definitely Terence that did the original Stones of Blood, because David Fisher got a chance to revisit it, I suppose. I think of that being recent, but actually David Fisher's been dead for a few years now, so it was probably about 10 years ago, wasn't it? Which means Matt could easily have been a child when David Fisher published his version of the Stones of Blood, which makes me very, very frightened. But anyway, the one I had, which I won as a prize at school, is definitely the one written by Terence Dix. But it's great, isn't it, how those books are inextricably linked with our childhoods. It's very special. Our scared, cold. Oh, you had to have hot. You could only get hot water at a certain time of day. They're only God, avocados were new. Oh, yeah, this modern generation don't know they're born, and we were scared of vampires. We blooming well were. Right, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening, and I'll just let this tail off apologetically, and I will zap myself into hyperspace.